Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Reign of Troy Radio, episode 458, coming to you on Wednesday, November 2nd, ahead of the homecoming game on Saturday night, USC and Cal. The Cal Bears coming to the Coliseum to play USC for the last time as a member of the Pac-12 Conference, USC. Of course, they'll meet next year up in Berkeley for the last time, all told, in conference. We're going to preview the game, give you our predictions, and so much more. As always, you can follow us, the show, on Twitter at Penguin of Troy is Alicia, and I am at Michael Cast FS. I'm your host, Mike Castillo. Someday I'll get this new intro right. You are Alicia Deratola. Welcome.
Hello, everybody.
Hello.
That was weird for me too.
Yeah, this whole thing is clunky.
Yeah.
We're just chugging along. Big welcome to everybody joining us here live on YouTube. It is another week. It is homecoming week. I'm always excited about homecoming. I miss being on campus for homecoming, the hubbub of homecoming. I remember as a kid, the feeling of how cool it was to go to homecoming week, and you would go and get the autographs of every team, every SC team. The basketball team would be there. You get all the autographs. Like, oh my God, it's Brian Scalabrine. Oh my God, is that Jeff Trepanier? Oh my God. Yeah.
Yeah, the kids know those names.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, that was always a fun time. And so if you're there on campus this week, live it up over for homecoming. Of course, SC and Cal at 7:30 p.m. on the ESPN. A little weirdness this week, sort of on campus, sort of off campus, I guess. The MLS Cup is going on earlier in the day. LAFC against Philadelphia, I guess.
Yeah, and apparently USC has the sort of rights to like the parking, so there's no parking for MLS Cup traffic.
How awkward! How awkward is it? Like your team is going to play in a championship, and you have nowhere to park because your team built the stadium next to a huge university that owns all the land.
Yeah,
or maybe not owns all the land, but owns all the parking,
and certainly gets priority on a Saturday during the fall. Maybe, I don't know. It's hard to plan for things that you can't be. So, like, you might not have predicted that LAFC would be in the MLS Cup. So, I mean, that's fair. But it feels like somebody should have planned something better.
Who were you predicting? I think I had Seattle before the season.
Me predicting.
Well, you were high on what? Nashville SC, I think.
Yeah, Nashville, Austin FC. Something Orlando FC in a clash of titans in the MLS.
Orlando City SC.
Orlando City SC. That's right. Yeah. So, good luck to LAFC.
This is the last time we ever talk about MLS on the podcast.
I aspire to be an LAFC fan. I would love to get season tickets. I haven't been to Bank of California Stadium yet. I want to desperately. It just hasn't worked out time-wise. So
it's a cool looking venue.
Yeah, I would love to go there and watch a game. Everyone tells me it's awesome. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it at some point in life.
Yeah. So, you guys can go to watch the footy as a preview, or you can head over to campus and, of course, get the autographs from the basketball team.
Who's in the best spot for that game is crossover fans, like the USC fans who are LAFC fans who already have parking for the USC game.
Yeah, those 14 people are in a sweet spot.
Yes.
Absolute sweet spot.
Exactly.
Big shout out to the chat, by the way. A lot of people super pumped up about the basketball mentions. We got Desmond Farmer, this guy named Matt Kumagai in here talking about Desmond Farmer and Brandon Granville. SJ says Sam Clancy. Let's keep it going. Yeah, you can mention all those guys from the past.
Why I am blanking on the coach's son who was sort of like bald or sort of buzzed hair, went to play in Italy.
Oh, Daniel Hackett?
Daniel Hackett. That's right. I was like...
Daniel Hackett way after. Yeah.
Yes.
Tim says the Craven twins. Yes. Eric and Derek Craven, 22 and 24. Yeah. Remember Lodrick Stewart and Roderick Stewart?
Yes, Lodrick Stewart and Roderick Stewart. Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, good times.
Good times indeed. All right, let's get to a review over on Apple Podcasts. We got 5 stars from JTZT. Says favorite USC podcast, but ... I love this podcast. Definitely my favorite USC football podcast, but I will stop listening if you plan to continue interrupting Alicia mid-sentence with a loud, annoying sound effect and an ad. That was terrible. All right, this is
terrible, Michael.
This is my fault. So I listened to the CarCast backwards. Not backwards. I listened back to the CarCast. Listening backwards would be interesting.
Yeah. No satanic messages in there, I hope.
No, or no Coldplay references.
Yeah.
Listen to the CarCast back, and yeah, here's the problem with the CarCast episodes. We don't have segments in the CarCast episodes, so the ad placement's always weird. You gotta like sort of find a place to put the ad in. And sometimes what sounds like a reasonable place because you're looking for a spot where there's dead air and a change of commentary doesn't actually play out to be one. And yeah, we picked a dumb spot, so we'll get better with that. But we appreciate the 5 stars nonetheless from JTZT. So thank you. Yeah. As always, you can leave a review over on Apple Podcasts. And then if you're joining us here on YouTube, be sure to subscribe, like the channel, like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, all those things. All those things you're supposed to do.
Yeah, and I personally want to thank JTZT for leaving a 5-star review and being constructive, and we're always taking constructive criticism inwardly and trying to produce the best show we possibly can. Personally, the last 2 episodes, I've been looking at myself and going, why is my camera so dark compared to Michael's camera? And I didn't do something to address that in this episode, but little things like that we're self-critiquing as well. Just in my mind.
Speaking of, big shout out to Glenn, by the way, who has supplied us with some F1 hats from
our
US
apparel
Grand
supplier.
Prix.
Yeah, our apparel supplier for this episode. This episode brought to you by Glenn, who is the #1 Rotbot. We're declaring him at the moment. Picked us up from some merch. I've got a number 55. Oh, it's over there. Number 55 Carlos Sainz hat, which Carlos Sainz being number 55 at Ferrari feels very fitting for USC fans. The 55 carrying on that. Michael has a Max Verstappen cap with the number 1. Yeah. And
reigning world champion, 2-time world champion.
A 2-time world champion, yes. And hopefully my baby Carlos Sainz will one day be a champion as well. But
the number 1 right here on my hat, also the number of Carlos Sainz wins. So,
but seeing him get a win for me was wonderful. So,
yeah, big shout out to Glenn. Thank you, Glenn. You're awesome. And
#1
we'll be rocking with the caps going forward here. Let's get to some news. Shall we do that? Talking about the college football rankings that came out yesterday, Tuesday. It's always Tuesday when these things drop. And right before the World Series game, they dropped it yesterday about 4:00. SC is number 9 in the college football playoff rankings. Same place where they are everywhere else. So that not surprising. There is a big shakeup. Tennessee is the number 1 team, according to the committee, followed by Ohio State 2, Georgia 3, Clemson 4, Michigan 5. So that puts Clemson ahead of the Wolverines at 4. Alabama 6, TCU 7, Oregon 8, and LSU, the big winner of the night, moving up 5 spots from the AP poll. They're 15th. They are 10 in the college football rankings. And UCLA drops down to 12 in the committee rankings. They are 10th in the AP. Oregon, of course, we mentioned it, 8. Utah is 14. Oregon State 23. So important things to mention here. The way the Pac-12 teams are, UCLA falls down a couple of spots. Utah falls down a couple of spots. Don't worry about it. All the games are still in the future. It'll all get sorted out, whatever. The point is that the Pac-12 teams are not collectively lower down the ranking. If that was the case, that would be sort of problematic. That's not the case. Everything is where you would expect them to be. The good news for SC is Oregon State is ranked. I do find a couple of interesting things here, though. LSU getting a bump up to number 10. I think this is sort of a correction. I thought it was interesting earlier that LSU was really docked for their week 1 loss to Florida State, which is because of a missed PAT. I thought it was weird how they were sort of docked pretty heavily for that. And a blowout loss to Tennessee, who's ultimately the number 1 team, right? According to the committee. Well, here they are at number 10. This gives Alabama a shot for, quote, a top 10 win now. Is there a doomsday scenario, Alicia, where Alabama and, like, could the SEC somehow finagle 3 teams here?
Of course. There's always a doomsday scenario that says the SEC could finagle 3 teams because LSU isn't a top 10 team. I'm sorry.
But, like...
It's frustrating because it feels like one of those everyone's just buying into the bull crap. Like, I get that their loss to Florida State was narrow, but like by that measure, then USC should be ranked higher than a bunch of teams in front of them because their loss to Utah was so narrow. Beating Ole Miss, an Ole Miss team that I think we can all agree is a top 15 team, but not much better than a top 10 team. That's just where they're going to be this year. That's where they're going to perpetually be. They got their butt kicked by Tennessee. They barely beat Auburn. They have not been LSU has not been impressive enough as a 2-loss team for me to say yes, they deserve to be top 10 over a 1-loss UCLA team, the teams that are in and around that area. It just doesn't track for me. UNC is a 1-loss UNC, and yeah, I don't know that North Carolina is all that good, but they're ranked in the teens. I think they're like 17 or whatever. So it just feels like overvaluing an SEC team because we've decided that beating a bad Florida team and a bad Mississippi State team and a bad Auburn team is somehow more worthy than the bad wins that, teams like UCLA have or teams like whoever have. Like, it frustrates me. It's stupid. There's always a doomsday scenario, but also it's not worth getting that fired up about these rankings right now because literally this does not matter. This sets the table, but everyone's still got to go out there and win. And, Michigan fans are upset about being behind Clemson. Yeah, but Michigan's going to play Ohio State. So you either will be or you won't be in that top 4 after that game. Tennessee and Georgia are going to play. It doesn't matter who is 1 and who is 3 and who is whoever. Whoever wins that game is number 1 in the nation next week. That much is pretty clear. So all of those things still have to play, and it doesn't really matter. It's just frustrating that like Alabama's going to get that top 10 win against an LSU team that, I don't know. Yeah, they're ranked, but like
I think LSU is just about probably where they should be. The exception of they shouldn't be ahead of UCLA. They shouldn't be. They should be in the ballpark where Utah is or whatnot. But like, I'm fine with them being like 12 or 13 or whatever. I don't have a big deal with this. I did think it was interesting that earlier in the season, I thought they were underrated because they were sort of, too ranked too low compared to what usually happens with SEC teams. That's the thing. Usually with SEC teams, you start out 4-0 and 4-1, and suddenly you're pushing on the top 10. Didn't happen with LSU, which was interesting to me. But that's all I'm talking about.
I think K-State and UCLA have a real argument here.
Absolutely. Yes.
K-State has a loss to Tulane that's equivalent probably to the Florida State loss. That's just weird, embarrassing early. K-State has wins over Oklahoma State and Iowa State and Texas Tech, and their loss to TCU was a tight loss. Like, I don't know. I think K-State and UCLA have a really good argument to be ahead, but
Right. The point
if
is,
K-State or UCLA wins out, then they'll be ahead of them anyways. So
it really doesn't matter. The whole rest of the season, everyone still has to play somebody else, with the exception of TCU. TCU is the only one that doesn't have a game against someone in the top 10 still left on their schedule. So they're going to be the ones that have to figure that out. Oregon, if they go to the Pac-12 championship game, is going to end up playing someone who's right around there. And so everything has to play out. We'll see how it goes. I think the interesting thing, I always talk about how, what would I wish that the playoff varied in size based on the year, and how some years, yes, a 4-team playoff is what you need. Some years a 2-team playoff is all you need. Some years you need an 8-team playoff or whatever it is. I'm genuinely fascinated to figure out what it's going to be this year.
Yeah.
Because I think there's a world in which a 4-team playoff is what is needed, but won't be exactly what will be dictated to be what we get. Well, in the sense of it's fascinating that Tennessee and Georgia, you can argue, are the top 2 teams in the country. I think the top 3 are certainly debatable, right?
Which order? Yeah.
Yeah, they're in the same division. Ohio State, Michigan are in the same division, which means you end up with this scenario where there's going to more than likely at least be one 11-1 non
conference champion.
Conference champion. And from what we've seen in the past, those teams tend to get in. And so do you end up in a situation where there's 2 of them? And then what happens? Then it's this weird I don't know. It's going to be fascinating to see how it all plays out.
So. But doesn't this feels like we're heading towards the season? Just when you take Matt Kumagai in the chat, who's saying that? Tennessee. I know. Tennessee beats Georgia and wins the SEC East. Then Alabama beats them in a rematch for the SEC title. 1 loss Tennessee, 1 loss Georgia, 1 loss Alabama.
It's the doomsday scenario.
Then you factor in the Ohio State, Michigan 1-loss scenarios. And then you factor in the TCU of it all. And then you factor in the Pac-12 of it all. Yeah. And this feels like the perfect year for no, this is the year we were going to need an 8-team playoff.
It might end up being that way.
Yeah.
Or it might end up being a way where, okay, well, Tennessee beat Georgia and Alabama. Okay.
So they're the ones that are
they're just clearly in.
Yeah.
Ohio State beats Michigan. Well, they're clearly in. And then Clemson and TCU are the only other undefeated teams. And there you go. There's only 4 undefeated teams. Boom, done.
But at the same time, and we're still early in the season, there's still a lot to play. At the same time, we could end up in a situation where by the end of the season, it's very clear, no, actually, it's just Tennessee and Ohio State. And it's a 2-team playoff that we really need. The rest are just are cannon fodder. And that's one of the things I fear for the winner of the Pac-12. If things play out a certain way, in that scenario where Tennessee and Ohio State are the clear title contenders, then you're going to end up with an Oregon or a USC or UCLA in the playoff as cannon fodder for one of those 2 teams to just have their warm-up match.
SJ in the chat says, I can see a world where 2-loss LSU could make the playoffs ahead of a 1-loss Pac-12. The crazy thing, because you talk about LSU maybe not deserving to be there. They're also in a position to play so many teams ahead of them to basically play their way in.
I can tell you right now, in that doomsday scenario, and this is talking to someone who I don't want to argue too hard for USC making it in the playoff, because I don't think USC is a playoff team, if I'm honest. But if there was a scenario where a 2-loss LSU team got into the playoff over a 1-loss USC team, where that 1 loss was a 1-point loss at Utah, I tune into the podcast that week, guys, because I will be throwing things around the room.
Can I hear you, but can I just say
it's not going to happen?
Tennessee beats Georgia. LSU beats Alabama.
Okay.
LSU wins the West. They go over, and then they avenge their loss against Tennessee. And then they have 1 loss that was on a mixed extra point, and then 1 avenged loss against the number 1 team in the country. And then SC has the argument of their only losses against is a 2-point conversion, but then they don't have the win power that LSU does. That's a coin flip. Like it sucks. I get it that it sucks to talk about that from the SC perspective, but it's a coin flip. But the point is, let's not talk about any of this. There's way too much football to be played. It's November.
Yeah.
SC has to go get a no loss November.
Yes,
of course, is the key here. And we'll see what goes down. Other news. Let's talk about practice news that has come out. Lincoln Riley's talked about the status of Jordan Addison, Mario Williams, Eric Gentry, Raylan Goforth, Andrew Voorhees. We should list this as Eric Gentry, Andrew Voorhees, Raylan Goforth, and so forth. Would be the good way to do that.
No.
Yes. You totally dropped the ball on the rundown there, genius. Jeez.
Not running with that one.
Yes. Tweet from Ryan Karchi says, after USC was without 4 starters last Saturday, Lincoln Riley says his gut feel is that SC will get some of its injured players back against Cal. Quote, we're doing better. Everyone participated, not in a full manner. We've got a lot of guys making a lot of progress. Among those injured players, of course, are Addison, Williams, Gentry, Goforth, Voorhees. Quote, we've got a lot of guys who will be close for the game. Seemingly some good news, right?
I mean, good news in the vaguest possible terms. I think that not having any of those guys back for this game is it's a game where you should be able to beat Cal without those guys, especially what we saw that USC was able to do against Arizona with the second line of the wide receiver core. I think you can go into this game and say you should still beat Cal under these circumstances, but we're now entering the 2 weeks. We're getting these guys back so that they're not rusty by the time you get to UCLA, so that they're back to full speed. Getting them back as soon as possible does start to matter. That's very vague, though. Like, everything he said there is very vague. You could have a scenario where one of those guys come back. You could also have a scenario where none of those guys come back, and it's just like, well, we thought they were close and they weren't close. So, like I said last episode, like on the Eric Gentry update, I fully expect Eric Gentry, all of these guys, to go out for pregame to do their sort of on the field, are they warming up or not, availability stuff, and then us to find out whether or not they're playing based on whether or not they emerge with the team in uniform. That's what we'll find out.
Yeah, it's the nature of the beast with college football right now. The information on injury, it's just not always going to be straightforward. Plus, things are always developing. There could be guys who just aren't cleared yet. Yeah. And maybe it's not as much of a secret. It's still a developing situation. So keep an eye on that on Saturday ahead of the game, SC and Cal. Lock and Horns, 7:30 p.m. Pacific on ESPN. The Cal Bears coming to the Coliseum last time as a Pac-12 opponent for USC. The Bears 3-5, 1-4 in Pac-12 play. Of course, led by former USC defensive coordinator Justin Wilcox in his 6th year up in Berkeley. They are ranked 63rd according to Jeff Sagarin. SC lost to the Bears 24-14 last year in the weirdest of games. Played a week late, couple of weeks late. Game that I feel like nobody watched but us.
And nobody wanted to play.
Yes. So take that for what it's worth. But this is the Bears team that is decent enough on parts of their defense. Their rush defense is not terrible. 37th in rush defense, but 126th in pass defense. Usually you think of Cal under Justin Wilcox as having a stifling secondary and going from there. Not necessarily the case this year. Offensively, they're right where we always sort of expect Cal to be. 101st in scoring offense, 82nd in total offense, 86 in yards per play. They're not running the football well, 106th in rushing, passing a little bit better, 48th in passing, led by former Purdue quarterback Jack Plummer. Jaden Ott, probably the danger man to be concerned of at running back. 117 carries, 675 yards, 5 TDs. They're in the Pac-12 in 10-plus yard rushes behind a couple of guys named Travis Dye and Zach Charbonnet. So that's good company for odds. But yeah, I'm not sure that Cal's going to keep you up at night with their offense, really, or their defense. The offensive line is a trouble, so much so that Wilcox went and brought back the old offensive line coach back as an analyst to try to get some help. It's been a year so far up in Berkeley.
Yeah, this is a weird team to look at. It's not like looking at Arizona, where we can come in here and say, man, that defense sucks. But that offense is kind of interesting, and they've got something going there on offense. They're run-of-the-mill mediocre in everything. And that's not like, on the one hand, they're not bad in any particular area. Like,
well, the offensive line is bad.
I mean, the offensive line is not good, but
pretty bad.
But like, I don't know, they're 41st in defense in S&P Plus. They're 110th in offense, but at the same time, they have at least Jaden Ott to scare you. Right. And
like Matt pointed out in the chat, receiving core pretty solid, led by Jeremiah Hunter.
Well, yeah,
J. Michael Sturdivant, Maven Anderson. They got guys there.
They've got
probably,
guys,
not the level of talent that SC has, and not the level of talent that Arizona had from last week.
But Jeremiah,
certainly some dudes.
Jeremiah Hunter is second in the Pac-12 in pass plays of 30-plus yards. He's sandwiched in between Dorian Singer and Jacob Cowing of Arizona, who USC just experienced as guys who made big plays and were dangerous. So it's not that Cal is lacking weapons. They have some weapons on offense. It's not that Cal is lacking defense. They have a defense that can stand up. But at the same time, their offense is not so good that you look at it and say, like Arizona, man, they could put up 37 points.
Yeah.
And their defense is not so good that you look at it and say, man, they can stop USC in their tracks. So where do you find the Cal of it all? Where do you go? I mean, it's a weird matchup that you could get lulled into sleep to think like, oh, this is going to be a blowout. But like, I don't think it's going to be a blowout. I think it's going to be like one of those weird, like, maybe they'll hang around for a little while because they're not bad, but they're not good, but they're Cal? I don't know.
I mean, I went into last week's Oregon-Cal game thinking that there was a world in which, we saw Washington struggle there in Berkeley a couple weeks back at a very late night game. And I thought, maybe Oregon will do the same thing. They had a noontime kickoff last week, and maybe this could be the game that gets weird. Things do happen weirdly to any good team in Berkeley. It's one of the places we talk about Corvallis and good teams struggling in Corvallis. I feel like the other place people struggle is Berkeley.
Sneaky, difficult. Yeah. And it's not because of
but that didn't happen for the Ducks.
Yeah.
It didn't happen for the Ducks. The Ducks win 42-24. Bo Nix had an incredible day through the air. You look at the passing yardage, 412 yards, 3 touchdowns, a couple of picks, but he performed exactly where he should be. I think what you look at this is look at what Oregon did and think, can SC repeat it? Can SC score 42 points against this team? Yeah, SC on offense is peaking right now. We've seen the offense the last 2 weeks in terms of sheer explosiveness is at the best that they've been all season. 42 points at Utah, 45 points at Arizona. And we talked about it in the CarCast. We talked about it in the Fallout episode after the Arizona game. There's like plenty of points that they could have even scored more than that. And SC right now, the last 2 weeks, averaging, low 40s. probably should have gotten over 50 in both of those games. The Arizona game, especially considering the missed field goals, considering the opportunity at the end of the half, the ref incidents, all that kind of stuff. Like, there were points there that SC certainly could have scored more. And I think going into this game, you have to think the most about this offense, even without the guys at wide receiver like Addison and Williams, because SC's got so many other depth guys. Caleb Williams threw for a career high in passing yards last week, and that was without his top 2 targets. So what happens if he gets one of those back and it's a home game? It starts to look pretty well. And this is a Cal passing defense that is, just as bad as Arizona's was, 126 in the country, 292 passing yards allowed per game, and they just had Bo Nix just absolutely shred them at home. What's it going to be on the road? Can't be much better.
Well, they're 0-3 on the road this season.
Yeah.
And Cal is. And like you pointed out, like, to me, anything Bo Nix can do, Caleb Williams can do better. I think it's fair to say that. Maybe a little bias here, but it's fair to say that. Cal doesn't have a particularly productive pass rush. And even if they did, we've seen what Caleb Williams can do to neutralize a pass rush.
Yeah.
It's Cal has better cover probably defenders than I think Arizona does, but we've also seen what Lincoln Riley does to scheme receivers open.
Right.
We've seen what Lincoln Riley does with getting a lot out of even second line guys. So do I think that they'll be able to shut down Kyle Ford? Well, if they can, then will they be able to shut down Taj Washington as well? Were they able to shut down Brendan Rice and Michael Jackson and Kyron Hudson? And, it's hard to see where this defense is going to get their joy. They are a significantly better run defense than Arizona brought. So back to the conversation we've been having for the last week, like, should USC slow down the game and run the ball more? This isn't necessarily the game to try to do that in, because you maybe are playing into Cal's hands if you try to run more in an effort to slow things down, but then Cal probably wants you to run more than they want you to pass at this point.
One of the arguments I've been meaning to make the last 2 episodes, I feel like I think about this after we've podcasted, the whole like slowing things down. What do your opponents want you to do?
Well, I think
if you were going up against SC, what is your goal? Your goal is to get the ball out of Caleb Williams' hands. And I think it's to slow down and take possessions out of the game. And so why, if you're SC, would you take possessions out of the game? That I go back to that aspect of it. I think you can run the ball more without necessarily taking the air out of the football. Like, I think there's certainly a middle ground there. And you can get the most out of your playmakers, and you can distribute the ball more and not be one-dimensional, and you can still be explosive and up-tempo and whatever you want to be, right? Like, I think you can do all those things. At the same time, it's going to be interesting to see how SC continues, because when we've seen them at home so far this year against Washington State, against Fresno State, against ASU, things were definitely more methodical. So will they be more methodical on Saturday, or will it be more of a open up, sling them kind of game like we've seen the last 2 weeks? I don't know. It's going to be interesting either way. I like SC in both of those styles of games. I think it's a matchup that thoroughly favors SC. We've talked about it before. This week and next week are sort of the lulls before the big one. And it's hard to sort of talk about those things because you don't want to look ahead too much, but that's where SC is right now, right? Like, I know it's homecoming and people are going to be excited for those kind of things, but like, it's hard not to look forward. And Lincoln Riley was asked about it, like, how do you not look forward? And, he gave the right answer of like, well, people, we know what it's like to go week by week and all those kind of things. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how that goes whether or not SC can, maintain its focus and whatnot. I think they were focused last week. It's just a matter of Arizona just being very good on offense and SC having no answer. And luckily, there's no Jaden Delara facing them this week.
Yeah. I don't think last week was an issue of focus or preparation or anything like that. That defense just looked like they didn't have the guys, and the solutions that they tried to patchwork together weren't working. Like I just think that was just a perfect storm of like, yikes.
Yeah.
It will be interesting. Like I said, after that game, if you have the same problems against Cal defensively, then you need to start really worrying, because Cal, with the exception of Jaden Ott, who is a sort of scary playmaker, doesn't have, they're not an offense that's going to completely terrify you. And even Jaden Ott has been kind of neutralized for the past few weeks, but the better part of a month, he's been much more neutralized by the defenses that have faced him. So my hope here would be that we see a bounce back game from the defense. And if you don't, even though there will maybe still be the injuries, like you do need to see something here that suggests that last week was just the perfect storm and not, well, the defense is just the wheels have come off.
Yeah, and a lot of that's going to be, do they get anybody more back? Especially like Gentry back. Do you get Gentry back on defense? The crazy thing is more of the injuries have been on offense, and they should be damning injuries when you're talking about the top two receivers, arguably the best lineman in the conference. Like, those should be really damning injuries, and SC seemingly is peaking on offense, and the defense is the one that's really hurting from missing their stud middle linebacker in Eric Gentry. So we'll see if Gentry gets back and whether or not that factors in on Saturday against Cal. Let's move ahead and go to some over-under picks. Alicia, you and I enter 29 and 29, which is fitting because now we go into the money month, November. November is the games that you remember. I've heard that recently, and I'm like, I like that. Yeah.
Okay.
November is the game that you remember. The games that you remember in November, whatever the hell it is. 29 and 29. Alicia, what's your first over-under pick?
Speaking of Jaden Ott, I'm going with 99.5 scrimmage yards for Jaden Ott. So scrimmage yards are rushing and receiving. He had 100+ rushing and receiving yards collectively against UC Davis, Arizona, and Washington State. And those were all sort of in the first month of the season. Since then, he's had 67 yards or less against Colorado, Washington, and Oregon, while averaging 3.9 or less or fewer yards per touch. So Jaden Ott in the beginning of the season was, I think 3 of the first 4 weeks of the season, he was the Pac-12 Freshman of the Week. There was 1 week where he was the Offensive Player of the Week, just on a tear. Been much, much, much more quiet for Cal in recent weeks, and Cal has also lost more games in recent weeks. So will USC be able to keep him under 100 scrimmage yards, or will he get back over that threshold in this game?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting sort of line there. I think SC has not necessarily dominated, running backs on the ground, but also I think for the most part, the big danger men that they've played this year have been at quarterback more than anything. This is a very good year in the Pac-12 for quarterbacks and receivers. Cal's danger man being a running back, I think is going to be interesting. So I don't know. Give me the over here. I think there's always room for yards. You said scrimmage yards.
Scrimmage, so receiving
which includes
and
the receiving and the rushing. I like the 2 angles there. I will say that when you add in the opportunity for this to potentially be a game in which SC is explosive on offense again, could mean more possessions for Cal. Could mean more points for Cal, but more than anything, could be more opportunities for them to gain yards. So give me the over.
Okay. I feel it.
I'm going to go to over under 3.5 sacks for USC. I'm stealing your line. I know this is a big one for you. You love to talk about sacks. And whether or not SC is going to get 3.5, that's usually the line you put. Sometimes you make it 4.5, which is insane.
Yep.
But no, you go with, I go with 3.5 this week. Of course, Cal is 109th in sacks allowed, allowing 3.13. They've lost 4 games on the bounce if you're keeping score at home. How have they allowed sacks in those 4 games, you ask? Cal had 2. Washington had 4. Colorado had 2. And Washington State had 4. 2, 5, 2, 4. Those are the last 4 games for Cal's offensive lines. 3.5 is the line for USC, who has been really good at getting sacks early on in the season, especially at home.
I hate taking an over on something like this.
Good. Take the under then.
But I feel extremely strongly, like my entire body is screaming over. Plummer is not Jayden de Laura. USC is still a defense that wants to get after the quarterback. My only fear here would be that Plummer gets the ball out quickly and neutralizes the pass rush in that sense, but he hasn't exactly done that. So I'm going to bet on USC getting that pass rush going against a struggling offensive line and a quarterback that doesn't have the wheels to do what Jayden de Laura did to USC. So taking that over, as uncomfortable as it makes me.
I like it. I dig it. I think that's a good pick. Would you have taken it at 4.5?
Yes. Ooh, and I would have hated myself.
Okay. All right. What's your next one?
Okay. I'm going 4.5 catches for Taj Washington. So
all right.
It's sort of a 2-part question here, because we've talked about like Taj Washington pretty clearly has become number 3 in the wide receiver pecking order.
Mm-hmm.
We don't know if Addison and Williams will be back. We just flat out don't know. Maybe they will, maybe they won't. So if they are back, will he still be able to be a target for Caleb Williams? If they aren't back, is he still going to be the primary target for Caleb Williams? What do we see from a guy like Taj Washington? He had a season high 7 catches for 118 yards and 2 touchdowns against Arizona.
Yeah, the only other game that he would have eclipsed the over here, been over 4.5, is 6 against Oregon State.
Yes.
4 against Utah. 2 against ASU. 1 against Fresno. None against Stanford. 4 in week 1 against Rice. Give me the over.
You're taking the over. Okay.
Taking the over. I like SC to throw the ball a lot on Saturday.
I think that's fair. I think the thing that gives me slight confidence in that under that I'm locked into as a result of you taking the over is there are so many guys who can eat in this offense.
Yes.
And we don't know who will pop up in every game.
I if it was anything higher than 4.5, I think I wouldn't have taken it. But I could see him getting 5 catches.
Yeah.
For sure.
He could have a big game with 4 catches for what,
He could. I mean, he was the leading receiver, I think, against Rice and Oregon State. And yet it was 4 for 65 and 6 for 67. So let's get to my next one. 399.5. Caleb Williams passing yards. Can he get back over 400? He had a career high last week with 411 against Arizona. Of course, we know that Cal's pass defense is atrocious. Caleb Williams, 411 yards against Arizona last week. Bo Nix, 412 against Cal.
This is diabolical. It's diabolical because I think, having seen what we saw from Caleb Williams against Arizona, be very easy, given what you said, given Cal's pass defense, to just run with the over here. But In the words of Lee Corso, not so fast, my friend. Cal doesn't have an offense to keep up with USC's offense. I don't think this is a game where we're going to continue to see Caleb Williams throwing the ball aggressively in the fourth quarter. I am actually going to go with the under on this.
Okay.
It won't be too much under, but I just think that this game is going to be slower in general offensively because the defense won't be bleeding as much as they were against Arizona, and there won't be as much pressure on USC's offense to match them. So I'm going under.
All right. It's reasonable, absolutely. Plus, it could be a situation where if SC, I don't know, if the passing really is great early on, maybe he isn't in the game long enough to get to 400.
Yeah.
Who knows? All right. So you take the under on that, which locks me into the over. What's your last over-under pick?
Going simple. It's a pick'em. 0.5 Caleb Williams interceptions. Cal is 15th nationally. They have 10 interceptions this season, and they've been spread out through the season. So it's not like they just had like 1 5-interception game. Caleb Williams has still only thrown 1 interception, which I'm trying to think. Like, I think that probably if I looked back at the numbers for Cody Kessler, there might have been a stretch of games without interceptions that match or are similar to this. But like, it feels like there's no way Caleb Williams will continue to not turn the ball over at any point this season. It's madness. It really is. So I'm just setting that line because it's got to happen sometime. If it's going to happen, might as well. I mean, Cal is the team that probably has the ball hawks that you would need to do it. So interception even.
Cody Kessler had 1 in the first 7 games of 2014.
So it'd be,
but he had another one in the 8th game. This is the 9th game for SC.
Yeah.
So a little bit ahead of that.
How many interceptions did he have for the rest of that season, Cody Kessler?
He had 4. He finished with 5. 39-5 was the.
So he had 3 in the last 4 games.
Yeah, but he never had a multi interception game.
Okay.
Yeah. I am going to take the over, and the reason I take the over, which means I think that Caleb Williams will throw an interception. He threw 2. One against Washington State, and one against Utah, that were both brought back for penalties. I know that those obviously don't count. And for one of them in particular, it was an egregious play that like set up the interception.
The only reason that interception was available was because of the PI.
So like I'm not going to sit here and be dumb and like, well, that he's getting bailed out by those. Like, no, that isn't the case. Yeah, I think it's what I'm saying is that he's just got to be due, right? Like he's got to be due for one. That's just the reality. That's not a knock on him. That's just the
I've been saying that for weeks.
The nature of football.
I've been saying it for weeks and it hasn't happened.
Yeah.
So
could be a dumb tip. It could be a dumb tip that not even his fault. Yeah. He's due for one.
I mean, Brendan Rice is dropping enough passes that maybe there will be just like a tip out.
Yeah. All right. My last over under is 7.5. Bryson Shaw tackles. He had 7 last week and got Defensive Player of the Week.
So yes, he was very involved last week.
Will he be involved the same this week or more?
I'm gonna just sort of hedge bets that one of Gentry or Goforth will be back, that USC will be playing a more traditional defensive base involving more linebackers. And for that reason, I wouldn't predict a safety having that many tackles in this game. It could happen. I'm just going with the under. I
like that rationale. I think that's good thinking. Makes sense. But I do like locking me into the over. I think that we're going to see more Bryson Shaw as we go on.
Yeah.
Later on this year, because also he doesn't have a lot of wear and tear on his body.
No, he doesn't.
Now, right. Yeah. So he's coming off the quad injury, but yeah, he's got a lot of life in him. Let's get to the game predictions. Bill Colley's numbers has an SC with a 89% win probability, a predicted score of 37-16. Vegas has SC as 21.5-point favorites as of putting this together. Alicia, what are you thinking?
I am going with USC 42, Cal 28. I think that USC will have similar success to what they had against Arizona. I think they'll be able to put up 40 points again. I think that's the base for this offense. I think they'll get there. Cal's offense is not impressive, but USC's defense is not impressive either. I don't know that enough of those guys who are injured will be back to make a huge impact. I think that Cal will put up points. I think that USC will win this game comfortably while also not covering.
Okay. I could see all those things. All that sound reasonable, all of that, and yet I disagree. Because I think SC gets to 50. They're due.
I mean, I would love that.
SC's due for a 50-point game.
I just don't know you do it against Cal.
No, I hear you, but I think that they're due anyways. Oregon just scored 42 on them, I think, and that was at home. Now Cal's on the road. SC's returning back home. I get it. I get all the rationale about, Cal's not going to be pushing the tempo up and all that stuff. I get it. I still think SC they have a game in them where they have to get 50 points. We will see it.
I think we're going to see it next
this week.
I think we're going to be seeing a 70-point game next week, so that's something to look forward to.
You never know. Yeah. 52 points for SC, and I'll say Cal gets I don't know, let's say 24. 52-24.
It's hard to pick that Cal.
I wrote 27 total. And I'm putting it down to 24. Yeah. Either way, mid-20s.
That's funny because I had mine 24 and I moved it up to 28. So.
Yeah. Mid-20s. So yeah. I have SC covering there. Let's go to the mailbag. Start with a YouTube comment we got from Steven Scross after the last episode. The defense is exactly what I thought it could be, and that is more discipline, less penalties, create some more turnovers. Last year's team was bad tackling, and add some size and depth to the linebackers. The last two would take at least a couple of years. A lot of top 10 teams have had their defenses lit up at some point this year, considering all the rules that limit tackling and how to tackle. New style seems to be created for offense in the name of safety. I don't think it's about the rules and
No, but there's an explosion of offense across college football and across the NFL. Like it's harder to defend than it has ever been to defend because offenses are sophisticated, because the especially in college, the ease of finding explosive offensive players, I think, is significantly easier than finding good defensive players who can tackle and have the right instincts and be elite. I just think that this happens. And there's a reason why the vast majority of not good teams out there, they're not in the mold of Iowa, where their defense is really good and their offense sucks.
Most bad teams
have decent offenses and terrible defenses. So I think that's sort of just the direction that the sport has moved. I tend to agree with this commenter. The defense is better, is marginally better in some areas, significantly better in other areas. It's just better though. So take what you get.
It's better. These last 2 weeks don't tell the full story, but we said that earlier in the year, and then they bounced back from that. And they sort of, the second half of the ASU game, everyone raved about how they were, especially compared to the first half. And the Washington State game, we raved about what the defense looked like against Washington State. So, we'll see. We'll see what this defense can do, whether or not they can bounce back. I kind of like them to really bounce back this week. So we'll see if that's in the cards. Eric on YouTube says, is Caleb actually making a read on the RPO, or is he already determined to make it a pass play? Could this be why the lack of periods when we get away from the run? No, I don't think you're going into the RPO having to make the decision, because the whole point of the RPO is to put a defender. Sometimes it's multiple defenders, but a lot of times it's just one defender. Put them in a spot to make a choice. And this is the other thing of why the offenses are so good nowadays, because so many of the offensive plays are designed to not just win physical beats, but to put a defender in a spot to make a decision. And they are designed to where it doesn't matter what that decision is, that the defender loses. Because if the defender takes this guy, well, here's this other dude you're going to go to. That's all the RPO is. The RPO is, okay, if this linebacker is going to crash in on the run, well, then I'm going to throw a quick slant into this receiver who is the pass rusher, creates a vacated zone for the quarterback to throw into. That's how it works. If he is taking a step back in zone coverage, then you can hand off to the running back, who hopefully can end up getting to that second level, and getting there and finding a hole. Like, because then there's fewer numbers coming at you. Like, if you are predetermining if RPOs are runs or passes, you are defeating the purpose of an RPO.
Yes, I do think there is something. We've seen a lot of pre-snap decision-making going on, though, because we're seeing Caleb changing plays or making calls at the line or doing that. So, like, I think there's an element, not in the RPO game, but, like, there's an element of there are times where USC is reacting to the pre-snap defense. And that might be what that sort of explanation is heading towards in terms of the question is, that's why USC isn't running, because they're making a decision pre-snap to change into a different play. But like you said, Michael, like if we're talking specifically RPOs, then I mean, if you're running them right, then it should be based on post-snap activity by the defenders. But it all sort of goes into, Caleb might have an idea in his head of what the defender's going to do, and then when it happens, it just so happens that it goes that direction.
Yeah. Calix Rose in the chat says Caleb will sometimes not take checkdowns. See, I want to see numbers on those kind of things, because I think that that tends to be sort of an anecdotal thing of where we remember the times where he hasn't. I wish I had the number right in front of me, but like it was something like 33% of SC's passes in the Arizona game were at or behind the line of scrimmage. Which tells me that the check down is either a viable weapon, or SC is just throwing a lot of little short stuffs.
Yeah.
And it's probably a mixture of both, right? So like, I don't know. I would need to go back and watch more of that to really get a solid answer at that. Eric says, what's the prediction for this homecoming attendance? I don't know. What are you thinking? Mid-60s?
Yeah, I think mid-60s. USC's been getting mid-60s, lower mid-60s, probably maybe upper mid-60s here for homecoming.
Yeah. Hyman says, do you think SC will have throwback jerseys this week? We saw the avatar change to a throwback helmet. Would be cool. I'm going to guess not, because I think SC would have announced it already.
Yeah. I would love it. I'm not expecting it. I think we would have an inclination of it if that was the plan at any point this season. Yeah. I think we'd already know.
Yeah. Mark says, is this the game where Travis Dye rushes for 200 and Kyle Ford gets 180 and 2 touchdowns?
Kyle Ford might get 180 and 2 touchdowns, but Travis Dye is not rushing for 200 today. Nope.
You never know.
I mean, maybe, but like USC would have to run the ball way more than they wanted to, and also Cal, if they do one thing decently on, it's stopping the run. So yeah, no.
Yeah, it could happen.
It could happen.
Curtis from Moreno Valley says defense needs to spy the next dual threat quarterback that we face with a safety, please.
So here's the thing, though, is like they spied Jaden DeLora at times, and it didn't matter because the player spying was not spying well. So like a spy in theory is, yes, great. But the spy still has to be capable of keeping up with someone like Jaden DeLora, and that's where USC runs into problems because
the other side of it is the spy that you are taking a guy away to be a spy is one less defender to cover in the pass.
Yeah.
And so do you want to take that spy away from the pass rush or the pass coverage? It's the whole blanket thing. You got to leave something exposed, and going up against the quarterbacks that you talk about, the running quarterbacks coming up on the docket, it's DTR, and then it's either if you get there, it's either Cam Rising again or Bo Nix. All
Either
three
way.
of those quarterbacks can beat you with their arm.
Yep.
So like that's yes, in theory, yeah, spy and have a guy there, but I think it's a little bit easier said than done. A little more nuance for sure. Glenn says over under 1.5 Pac-12 referee rants for Alicia after the game.
God, I hope under. I hope. I hope. I have nothing more to say.
You would hope. You would hope. Joshua says, "What is our playoff scenario for SC to get in?
Win out.
Win. It's just win. SC. I thought SC completely controlled their own destiny. The guys over at USCFootball.com did some digging. Not necessarily their case. There's a world in which there's a 3-way tie that does not benefit SC. Go SCFootball.com to look up that kind of stuff. The main thing, though, SC winning out and Oregon winning out, the combination of those two would mean that it would be SC and Oregon in the championship game. So I think that's probably what you're rooting for.
Then you also need the doomsday scenario that we talked about earlier in the SEC to not happen. You need the doomsday scenario in the Big Ten to not happen.
Yeah.
Wouldn't hurt.
Going to the Pac-12 championship game is only a factor of it.
Wouldn't hurt if TCU lost a game or two.
You need TCU out of there, and you probably need Clemson out of there.
Yeah, you need some help, but that help is probably going to come just the way that a college football season plays out. So really the important thing is win out.
Clemson's the interesting one because if Clemson loses somewhere, I think they end up with a schedule that's not as impressive as SC.
The ideal for USC is for Notre Dame to beat Clemson, Notre Dame to be ranked when USC to be ranked as highly as possible. Because Notre Dame, I think, is already on the edge of being ranked. If they beat Clemson, they'll be ranked. And then by the time you get to the last game of the season, Notre Dame could be, depending on how things play, a top 20 team. And that would really help USC in terms of resume building. You also need
sabotaging Clemson helps.
But you also need sabotaging. You also need Oregon State to not drop any unnecessary games except for the Oregon game.
Right.
You need Utah to not drop unnecessary games.
Well, you could have Oregon State win out and beat Oregon.
It wouldn't be the doomsday scenario. No,
it wouldn't be the worst case scenario because but then you just have to hope that you play UCLA or Utah again, and they will have won out to that point, which you don't want UCLA to win out because you want to beat them. So maybe you want the rematch with Utah, and I don't know. Do you want the rematch with Utah? I don't know.
Well,
but then again, avenging a 1-point loss.
Yeah, but playing Utah in the Pac-12 title game is probably not the height of the ranked win that Oregon presents potentially.
Right.
So the point here is that we could spend 2 hours going over every scenario that's in play right now.
Yeah.
The important thing for USC is win out.
Yeah. All right. Rapid fire. Go down here. The rest of the questions that we got here. Courtman 17 finished the Fallout episode today while walking my dogs. No, correction. I turned the episode off once I realized you have terrible taste in candy and had nothing more to say about the teeth. Hey, I'm sorry. Crunch is the best candy bar there is. Crunch and Kit Kat.
Okay, don't yuck people's yums. That's all I say.
Yeah. SJ, what are the chances of the debut of your pup on this weekend's CarCast?
High, because the last 2 episodes I have wanted to go get her and bring her out. The problem is the last 2 episodes we were planning to leave immediately after the episode is done. We are going to leave, which means she's currently in her crate. I don't want to take her out of the crate only to put her back in the crate. So the CarCast I guarantee you will get a Jessie appearance, whether it's to lift us all up after a stunning upset or to show off the puppy after you.
Cam Lifestyles question, Michael, is it anyway or anyways? I honestly couldn't. Is it offside or offsides? I don't know. Your body just answers that for you.
Yes,
if you told me, is it supposed to be offside or offsides? I genuinely don't know. My mind just says one. I don't know. I don't know what my brain says.
Yeah.
Randy, who do you think will have a huge breakout game first, Michael Jackson or Rillick Brown? I think Rillick Brown has the easier pathway, right?
Yeah.
Let's go to an email we got from Guy, or is it Guy?
Guy?
Who says, "Dear Alicia and Michael, pay no serious attention to the pains in the arse, whom have nothing better to do than grouse about trifles. They need to get a hobby. Vernacular American speech is chock full of abundant repetitions of the word like, and we all use it profusely. But I wish to make special mention of Michael's own mannerisms of saying 100% in lieu of, say, absolutely. Well, get this. Recently, Ryan Abraham has taken to copying Michael's trademark mannerisms and is always now saying 100% too. Bravo then, Michael. You speech mannerism trailblazer, you Guy in Lake Balboa.
Our neck of the woods. It's exciting, Guy. That is awesome. We have stolen Ryan Abraham food analogies on occasion. Not stolen his analogies, just done the bit. So like, I get it.
I'm sure there's a lot of little things. Also,
hey, I feel like the more I listen to Keely, the more I had the inclination to start saying like interesting to things. So
she does say interesting.
She does say interesting a lot. So like,
it's interesting how she does. Wait, hold on. Talk. I'll do the Keely.
Yeah, it's just the way that we all talk is we pick up things from other people, and that's what we do.
Interesting.
Yes.
Yeah, that's Keely's bit. Yeah, for sure. No, I don't think the 100% thing is surely mine.
You do it a lot, though.
I do a lot.
You self-scouted that too.
No, I get it 100% for sure. Yeah. No, I'm fully aware. YouTube comment we got from Robert Smith. Michael, you're crazy. The $100,000 bar is the merging of Nestle's Crunch Tier 1 and the Mars bar Tier 1, the best bar out there. Maybe I don't know what it's in $100,000.
We need to get $100,000 and have you try it because it is perfect.
Huh. Mr. B00M, Mr. Boom, is that what that is? Question: what is the best wing sauce or seasoning? There is none because wings are bad.
That's Sean from beautiful Austin, Texas, by the way.
Oh, I didn't even read the next thing. It's Sean from beautiful Austin, Texas.
Good old Sean. No, wings are good. This man is a problem, but that's a discussion for another time.
Wings are bad.
I am partial to honey barbecue, personally. That's me.
Nope. All right. Let's wrap this thing up with one last question. Thoughts on Daniel Ricciardo not coming back till 2024? Says Eric. The answer is inevitable, unfortunately.
It's sad, but it was also sad watching him the last 2 seasons anyways. Yeah. So, yeah.
All right, we'll be back Saturday night with the CartCast of USC and Cal. Homecoming at the Coliseum. Be sure to play the over-under game. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, go down to the link and hit the link in there. If you're watching us on YouTube, hit the link in there as well, even though the link is probably outdated at this moment. We'll fix it. Go make your picks for over-under. And then we'll see you then after the game, late nights, Saturday night. So drink your coffee.
Yes. Or energy drinks.
Yeah. All right. Until then, we will see you. See ya.
See ya.